Good afternoon, everyone. I go by the name Shotade Olusegun. In this particular live session, I'm going to continue with the complex system of the universe that I started with in the last live session. So this is going to be the part 2 of that. So in this part 2, I'll be able to show you the application of formula of everything. We'll go through the 3 result phases together, and then we'll be able to we'll explore the quasar-like signal that that application of formula of everything is able to unravel. So basically, I'm not going to talk too much in this particular video because in the part 1 I had explained the nature of complex system, how it transcends the limit of the quantum mechanics, and then how we are able to get transition into that complex system via trajectory of time. In that part 1, I said time has 2 identities. By default, time is instant, and then by being in relativistic scaling with energy, time is continuous. Then I said energy is infinite by default. Then when energy is in relativistic with time, then it becomes discrete. Based on this nature, we can see the battle between time and energy, and the possibility of having mass convergence. You understand? So basically, that nature of time in relativistic relationship with energy is a serious phenomenon, and that could be seen as an intrinsic property of the fabric of the universe. So time is fundamental, energy is fundamental, then space is fundamental. By applying this formula of everything, we'll be able to see how space is fundamental. So now, with no further ado, I want us to dive into it. So I'm going to use this image on the screen. I'll make it big now, and then I will discuss more on it. So now we can see this clearly, and as you can see, this image is quite different from the image I used the other time. But basically, if I should take it up, you can see the application of formula of everything on this particular image is the same thing as that of the previous live session. So now there are some things I'm going to explain using this image right here, and then it is highly essential for us to understand this concept. Now when you look at this equation that we have right here, we have e to the I theta equal to cosine theta plus I sine theta. That is what we have right there. Now this e to I theta is the complex wave. Then right inside, after the equal to, we have cosine theta to be the real wave, while the I sine theta is the imaginary wave. there is something so profound about imaginary number. We know that imaginary number is square root minus 1. I is square root minus 1. Now, when you solve imaginary number progressively, such that you have, we have I, then let's say we now have I to the power of 2. So now by having I to the power of 2, that I to the power of 2 is going to be -1. And then when we now have I to the power of 3, that particular value is going to be -I. And so now when we now finally have I to the power of 4, then we're going to have that to be 1. So when you look at that, you can see flipping effect. So no matter how far you go solving the imaginary number, it will continually flip. And so imaginary number can actually be added with or multiplied with real number. And there is another thing about complex number, the kind of relationship we have between the imaginary number, real number, or probably let me say complex number in general. So if I'm to just try to dissect the kind of relationship between real number and imaginary number, it's a kind of relationship that is commutative. It is quite commutative. And that is why we could, have that phenomenon of entanglement. So entanglement is actually beyond the quantum mechanics. It transcends into the complex system. So it, right from the substrate dimension, it transits from the substrate dimension into higher dimension. And so imaginary number, could really be used effectively with complex number. With real number. Real number could easily be used, effectively with imaginary number. But there is something so profound about this imaginary number. So if we now say that we have real number on the substrate dimension and then imaginary number on the higher dimension, then imaginary number is a kind of number that must, activate that flipping mechanism such that we can have integration of that imaginary number on that substrate dimension. So basically, when you draw the chart, we know that imaginary number usually have, effect. Imaginary numbers usually have effect on real number. You understand? So that has always been the case. You understand? So imaginary number can influence real number, and real number can as well influence imaginary number. So now, if this equation that we have right here, if we're to separate real wave from imaginary wave, we're going to have, the wave as we have it below. The red wave pattern is the imaginary wave, while the black wave pattern is the real wave. Now, when you look at that wave, I didn't actually, draw this quite all right. So if I drew this quite all right, when this black, I want you to look at the dot towards the right side. That one is a little bit closer. You see that where that black dot is at the central, is on the central line, we have the maximum, energy as a energy reservoir for the real wave. So what I'm trying to say is that at the point where we have that real wave on that central line, we have the peak level of imaginary wave. That is how it's supposed to be. I'm so sorry I didn't draw it quite all right. You understand? So basically, what that is telling us is that when the real wave reaches the central point where there is no energy, there is, I don't know, maybe it's a kind of, I don't know how to put it, but basically what I can say is that when there is no energy for real wave, there is a peak energy potential for imaginary wave. So that is why I say imaginary wave serves as energy reservoir for real wave. So by the time we now apply this formula of everything, we'll be able to see how we usually get connected to the positron at higher dimension. And the moment that positron is injected into the system, which is the substrate system, then we have what is called energy energized. Because at that central phase of time peregrination, energy is at low energy state. So there must be a need for energy to be energized for it to move into the black hole. And so that positron is more or less like an energy reservoir for electron. So where electron is exhausted, or where electron is at low energy state, then positron can actually come in. And then another thing I've observed by applying formula of everything is that positron, which is the anti-particle of electron, is operational in the black hole. So that solves the matter-antimatter conundrum. So we know we really have matter in the universe, but we can't actually, tell where antimatter or where antimatters are in the universe. So by getting connected to positron, at higher dimension, and having it to energize, momentum at that event horizon into the black hole, it means that positron is a reservoir, is an energy reservoir for the real energy of the universe, which is for electron in this case. So basically, this whole thing is synonymous to chirality in biology. By synthetic formation of chemical molecules, we know we usually have a right-handed molecule and then left-handed molecule. But now, biologically, one is dormant, one is dormant. The right, I think the right-handed formation is active, is operational, but that left-handed counterpart is dormant. And when a drug was actually synthesized for pregnant women, I think about 1950 something or so, I've forgotten, but I will do my research on that. So they actually synthesized the right and the left, and they know that left is dormant, so it will have no effect. But when the pregnant women took those drugs, that caused the fetus to be deformed, and so the baby most of the pregnant women gave birth to were deformed. Either the hand wasn't formed, either the leg wasn't formed. So from that we can see that probably maybe the antimatter is being designed for destruction. That could be why antimatter is operational in the black hole. So when someone gets into the black hole, nobody has entered into the black hole, but based on what people have been saying, there is this spaghettification effect that people have been talking about. That is not going to be, it's not going to be a good experience. And by having such effect, how destructive black hole would be. So probably maybe antimatters are reserved, because when you look at the whole thing, there is a phase where the universe is expanding. So we could call that, the life aspect of the universe. And then there is another part where the universe is contracting. So we could call that the death part of the universe. So everything that has life will definitely have death. You understand? So that is that. So now, that being said, I will do more research in that chirality to discuss more on that. That may be my next live session. So now, when you look at this from the wave, I could interpret the imaginary wave as an energy reservoir for real wave energy. That is what I can say about that. So, and my stand is actually based on what I have seen by using formula of everything. So that is why I'm saying that. So now let's look at the equilateral triangle that we have right here. I said that in the universe there are two flipping mechanisms. There is this dimensional flipping mechanism, and then there is relativistic flipping mechanism. So by applying formula of everything, we have the emergence of equilateral triangle, which is nested right inside the curvature of time to energy. And so by applying formula of everything, we have vertical trajectory, which signifies instant trajectory of time. But by having such trajectory being elongated such that it travels from the classical realm down to the quantum and even beyond to the complex level, then we know that it shouldn't be, because when something is said to be instant, it has to be snappy. And by having that elongation, we know that what we have there is a field. And so I call that field reality field. So my interpretation for the elongation is that the elongation is needed. So the elongation is actually caused by energy. So it is that elongation we synchronize time such that we have a global now. A global now is, is a phenomenon that Einstein said that it might not really possible when, we have when we have objects being far apart in the space, or probably we are, when you have motion or you have things being far apart in the space, time reading will be different. So I will still go deep into why we have this phenomenon. But basically, when you look at it, energy is discrete, time is continuous. So time trajectory is longer than the energy's trajectory. Because time is continuous, energy is discrete. So in the expanding phase, we're going to have the tilting effect of time peregrination, towards the past, as we have motion away from, the real classical object. And so in the black hole, we're going to have the tilting effect to be towards the future. So the energy will actually be ahead of time. And basically from that, we can get to know that when time is ahead of energy, we have mass convergence. And when energy is ahead of time, then we're going to have decay. We're going to have decaying effect. So now, this equilateral triangle, at that central line, vertical line of time peregrination, it is being flipped when that time trajectory gets beyond the quantum level into the complex level. So the trajectory gets connected to positron because it might be electron in first place and the whole thing is flipped, and then we have injection of that into the system. We have energy energized at that present phase such that we have momentum into the black hole. That is that. So now, this red equilateral triangle is the negative charge, while this black equilateral triangle is the positive charge. I just use that so that we can, quickly, so that we can understand it better. So now, the reason I say negative charge is that in the cosmological space we have expansion, so the trajectory of energy is downward, so we have negative sign, and that means that electron is at work in that expanding phase. Then in the contracting phase, we have the momentum of energy to be positive because it's actually increasing. So as time scales narrow, energy keeps on increasing. So that is why I say that is positive. So now, at that present phase where we have the vertical trajectory, which we could term the instant trajectory of time, what if you zoom in on that line, on that trajectory, what we're going to get will be this stacking of the present and the past equilateral triangle. So the present phase is a combination of the past and the future in vertical format. So we have this now. This symbol that we have at this at the right side, the symbol, the stacked equilateral symbol that we have, you can see that below the real and imaginary wave. That what we have there is called Star of David. Now, at the center we have equilibrium, so we have the equilibrium of time trajectory to energy trajectory. So the time trajectory is the instant trajectory, while the energy trajectory is the infinite trajectory. So at that central point, which that central point is, still the point of event horizon. And so now, right inside the black hole, we have this spiral formation, because the moment trajectory reaches the suspension, in the black hole there is neutron star suspension. After that suspension to singularity, we have mass formation, because momentum, I will say positron's momentum is being highly energized, so it is constantly accelerating, and that would allow for smoothness, because the introduction of excess energy will smoothen out the discrete nature of positron, such that we now have the momentum of that mass convergence to align with the curvature of energy to have standing wave. So basically, we have this spiral formation because it's going to be angular. So we shouldn't forget that the equilateral is being suspended at the point where the curvature of energy is intense, and so momentum there will be highly accelerated. When you are navigating an angular area, then there will be speed difference. There will be changes in speed. So that is what is happening right there. So as a result of that, we could have that spiral formation. But then let's look at the application of formula of everything. But before we do that, there are 4 things to consider in the complex system. The first one is 2D to 3D transition. We have transition from the substrate dimension, which is 2D, into the higher dimension, which is 3D. There is one video that I have, there is one live, yes, I did live of dimensional structure, where I talked about interlocking of dimensions. So when you have 2 flipped 2D, such that we have relativity connecting the 2 flipped 2D, we're going to have 3D. So for us to have 4D, then we're going to have 2 flipped 3D, such that we have relativity connecting the 2 vertically, and then we have 4D. So that is the whole thing. So relativity is an intrinsic feature of fabric of the universe. So now, quantum entanglement. We know that transmission of information by quantum entanglement is instant, and that can only be achieved when there is transition of this 2D to 3D. So quantum entanglement that we have, it actually transcends the threshold of quantum mechanics into the higher dimension. So everything together, we can call it complex system. So now, I said that positron is at higher dimension. So basically, quantum entanglement too will not be limited to quantum threshold. So it transcends the limit of quantum mechanics into the complex system. And that is why we could have that instant transmission of information. So that is that. The third thing, that is the flipping mechanism. The flipping mechanism demands that whatever it is that trajectory gets connected to must be flipped, such that that thing must be integrated into the system and then energize the system for further momentum. Then the fourth thing, that is the complex system integration. Complex system integration. So I've said that the complex system must be integrated into that, ordinary system of the substrate dimension. You understand? So that is that. So now, let's now go to the application of formula of everything. Application of formula of everything, the T, the M equal to capital UM plus 4M. That is the formula of everything. Now, when we now substitute the value of electron into the place of the two M's, such as what we have below the first result phase. Once we have it like this, it will give us 2,277,250,000 kilograms, and that is the classical mass worth. So by using formula of everything, we can get to know what the the corresponding classical mass worth of that quantum mass worth is, and then we can get to know the position of it. So now, one thing about formula of everything is that it's a formula that fits back on itself. So that feedback is so essential. That feedback is so essential because we can use the feedback to track momentum into the black hole, further into the black hole, for us to get what is really happening at the core center of singularity of the black hole. So now, what I mean by feedback is that when you use an input to generate an output, you can as well use that generated output as input to generate further output. So that is what we're going to do right here now. Now we have that 2,277,250,000 kilograms to be the classical mass. Don't forget that we use the mass worth of electron to get the, to get the mass worth, the classical mass worth. Don't forget that. But the trajectory, we need to know that that trajectory of time is one-way traffic. So now let's say we want to reconfirm the electron's mass worth by using this classical mass worth in our formula of everything. So now if we substitute that value in the place of the two M's, we're going to have what we have below the result. And so that will give us the value that is underlined in black pen. That value is what we get. But that particular value, when extended in standard form, then we're going to see that the weak conveying force, which is the 4m part of that formula, is being suspended at 32nd position of the 0. So by having that, we can then manually annihilate. But basically what we have at that classical suspension is spontaneous free fall, which is the classical gravity. But that classical gravity has limit. When it gets to a particular point, then quantum gravity will take over. Quantum gravity will serve as a resistance to that free fall. But quantum gravity is so tiny. I will talk more about gravity in another live session. So now we have this, and by having this, we can, manually annihilate. And so if we annihilate that manually, so that is where we have to manually annihilate we have. So now we're going to have our 9.109 times 10 raised power minus 32. Now, instead of getting 9.109 times 10 raised power minus 31, we got minus 32. So minus 32 is smaller to minus 31, and that shows that that value has been decayed. So we have suspension. So by the time time travels through the suspension, there is going to be radiation, and that will lead to decay. And by having the value to be decayed as what we have here, it means that the trajectory is into the future. So the trajectory is into the black hole. So definitely we only have that grace of having the vertical line at one traffic. So that line is so tiny that we only have the grace of getting that vertical line at one run, at one traffic. So now, by having that, then we know that the momentum has gone into the black hole. So if we are now to use what we have gotten here in our formula of everything, so as to reiterate the application, then we are going to, instead of getting the 2,277,250,000 kilogram, we got 277,725,000.0000003 kilogram. Now, this .00 that we have right there, it has no effect. We can get rid of that. So now we can see that the tiny decay of minus 1, which made the value of our electron to be power of minus 32, has resulted to almost about 2 billion decay at classical level. So we could liken that to butterfly effect. So now you can see that, and so right now we truncate that value after the dot, and so we put our 277,725,000,000 in place of the 2m to reiterate again, and then the result that we get is this particular result that is being underlined, which is 6.9 times 10 raised power 47. Now, when we extend that in standard form, we will realize that that particular value, the weak conveying value, is being suspended at 31st. Now, that has taken it back to the power of the real electron, but the base value is being decayed. Now, there is something I want you to know. Now, when we now manually annihilate what we have been suspended, we now discover that instead of getting 9.10, we got 1.1109 times 10 raised power minus 31 kilogram. Now, the base value of electrons watt is being decayed, and that gives us the swinging forth and back of quasar signal. So that could be likened to the swinging forth and back of quasar signal. So now, another thing I need us to pay attention to is that we have 1 at base. At the power, we have -1 to shift the value, to reduce the value. But you can see that it is asymmetric in the sense that -1 up, but at the base we have 1, positive 1.1, not absolute 1. So you can see that the remnant of the base value is asymmetric to the power value of that -32. So now this asymmetric nature shows that space is a fundamental part of the universe, because the totality, it is not being symmetric, and the totality of the base worth is not being decayed. So definitely we have non-zero energy state. So basically that is what formula of everything can give us by application, and it is so powerful. If we explore this further, we'll get everything is so powerful. So now the third result phase, if we should reiterate the third result phase, it will just result to infinite loops. So right at the core singularity of black hole, there is this infinite loop the moment you go beyond the feasible value. So but now with the formula of everything, we can get the value up to the point that we can say 1 or 2 things about black hole. And so with this, we know the kind of phenomenon that we have right inside the black hole. So no theory has gone so deep as this. So this is so deep, and all glory be to Almighty God. So that is formula of everything for you, and that is its application for you. And then you can see what we are able to achieve. You can see what we are able to achieve with that. You can see that with that we can say 1 or 2 things about black hole. Now it is so deep right now that we can say that black hole could, that we can confidently say that black hole could be highly destructive. So but basically there is this mass resistance after the neutron star's suspension, you understand, and we see that the totality of the mass is not being decayed as such, and basically there is this flavor of space even in the compactness of the universe. So that is why I say time, energy, and space, they are all fundamental properties of the universe. So there are more things to discuss. I will still talk more about consciousness, talk more about free will, and some other things that the mainstream scientists have been struggling to explain. Now this formula is so powerful. And what makes it to be so powerful is for the fact that it can feed back on itself, you understand? And then it tracks the position of quantum object in relation to the position of classical object. So that is that. I remain my humble self, Shotade Olusegun. I believe this live session is quite informative. So I need more people to join this session, and I would, really appreciate it for people to, chat, to say their own opinion. They can ask whatever question they want to ask. So this is another live session on Twitch. So I may have a couple of these on YouTube. And if you want to know more about me, I have many videos on YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is at Shotade Olusegun. So when you get there, you see video where I explain the application of formula of everything deeply. And then I have research publication on ijser.org. When you get to my YouTube channel, you'll be able to actually get, links to my research publication. And if you get connected to me on my LinkedIn, yes, you are going to get all this. Just search for Shotade Olusegun. Shotade Olusegun on LinkedIn. You can get connected to me on Instagram at ShorixNoni. You can get connected to me on Twitter, on X at Shotade1, Shotade A1, Shotade A and 1. So you can get connected to me on X with that. So you can get connected to me on TikTok at ShorixNoni. So thank you. God bless you. Remain blessed forever.